Good afternoon, boys and girls. This video is for GOMath Grade 4, Lesson 6.3, Simplest Form. And this is the lesson that was already taught in class today, so there's no need to copy the teaching point since we already did in class. But I will go over what the teaching point and what the goal is for you to accomplish, okay? So I can write a fraction as an equivalent fraction in simplest form. Now we know that an equivalent fraction is two fractions that represent the same amount, but they have different numerators and different denominators. Well, today we're going to be looking at fractions and how do we write a fraction in simplest form. And that means that we're going to simplify a fraction so that the numerator and the denominator have a lower number, but they still equal the same amount. Okay? So in class, this is the same slide that we looked at in class, and simplifying fractions, or in other words, reducing, some of us, when we were taught in the earlier years, is a reduce a fraction. And it means to make the fraction as simple as possible. We say 4/8 when you really mean 1/2. So what this is saying is that 4/8 can be simplified into 1/2. So 4/8 is equal to 1/2, but you will see that the numerator 4 is now reduced to or simplified to 1, and the 8 in the denominator has been simplified or reduced to 2. So we say 4/8 in simplest form is really 1/2. So they're still equivalent, but the numerators and denominators are simple as possible. So really meaning to the lowest numbers that we can get. Okay. So I have this quick little chart here. Okay. It says simplify fractions. Write the fraction in lowest terms or simplest form, right? And lowest terms means we're going to get the numerator and the denominator to the lowest we can. Okay. So you should all remember the little tune from class. So we simplify with factors, right? And in order to do that, we have to find the factors of the numerator. Find the factors of the denominator. So that is the first step. So we list the factors, right, of 4, right? And that's the numerator. And we list the factors of the denominator. Okay? And then we notice and we circle the common factors, okay? Which is 1, 2, and 4. And from that list, the 1, 2, and 4, those common factors, we're looking for the greatest common factor known as the GCF. G is for greatest, C is for common, F is for factors. So now we have to identify the greatest common factor. Then once we do that, in this case, the greatest common factor is the number 4. So then we divide both the numerator and the denominator by the greatest common factor, okay? So we take 4/8, we divide it by 4, the numerator by 4, we divide the denominator by 4, and we get 1/2. So 4/8 in simplest form is 1/2, okay? A fraction with no common factors, or where the common factor is only 1, or with 1 as a numerator, is already in simplest form. And we're going to take a look at that. Okay, so we're just going to follow these steps on one example together. You do not have to copy this. You just could go along with me in following the steps. Okay, so what is the fraction 6/8 in simplest form? All right, so we're going to simplify with factors. Okay, and we're going to list all the factors of the numerator. So the numerator in this case is 6. So we're going to list the factors, all the factors, okay, of 6. So I have 1, 6, 2, and 3, right? And I did that as a factor pair, like with the rainbow, right? Factor rainbow. Then I list the factors of the denominator. So the factors of 8, which I know are 1 and 8, 2, and 4. Now that I have listed the factors of the numerator and the denominator, I now have to go back, right, and look at those common factors. So I notice that they have the number 1 is one of the common factors, 2 is a common factor, 3 is not, and 6 is not. So therefore, the common factors are only 1 and 2. Now that I have identified the common factors, I am looking for the GCF, the greatest common factor. And in this case, the greatest common factor is the number 2. That is the greatest one that they have in common. So now I take my 6/8 and now I'm going to simplify it by dividing the numerator and the denominator by the GCF, which is 2 in this case. So I will take 6/8. I now divide the numerator and the denominator by 2, and this will give me an equivalent fraction, but the fraction is in simplest form, okay? So 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 8 divided by 2 is 4. So 6/8 in simplest form is 3/4. Okay? And even though 6/8 in simplest form is 3/4, we're also saying that they're equivalent. Okay? Okay, so we had lots of practice in class simplifying fractions. However, I do want to look at how can we tell if a fraction is already simplified. Okay, so how can I look at a fraction and say, do I have to simplify this fraction or is it already simplified? Okay, so we're going to look at 1/4. So how can I tell if 1/4 is already simplified? Okay, how do I know that we can't get smaller numbers in the numerator and in the denominator? Now, if we think of 1/4, you can't get less than that. That numerator cannot go less than 1, because if it did, it would be 0, and then you would have nothing. And you wouldn't be able to be equivalent to 1/4. So we can say that if there is a 1 in the numerator, the fraction is already simplified. Now, you did copy these notes in class, so no need to copy them again. All right, so I move on to the next fraction. It's 7/8, and I say, oh, wow, there's no 1 in the numerator. It's a 7. So how can I look at this fraction, or what do I need to do to determine if this is already in simplest form? Well, when in doubt, you're just going to try to simplify it, okay? So we're going to list the factors of the numerator, which is 7, 1 and 7, and the factors of the denominator, which are 1, 2, 4, and 8. And I go again following the same steps, and I find the common factors. So I look at these factors and I say, they only have the number 1 in common. That's it. So that makes that the GCF. The GCF is 1. Now, the rule is that once you find the GCF, you divide by it. So let's go ahead and do that and see what happens. You take your 7/8, we say divide the numerator and the denominator by the GCF. Excellent. So I'm going to divide by 1, since that's the GCF. Divide by 1, and what do you know? It gives us 7/8, which is exactly the same numbers that are in the numerator and the denominator as the original fraction. So we did not change it. We did not make those numbers lower in the numerator and denominator. They stayed the same. So we know that if the greatest common factor is the number 1 and only number 1, it is already simplified. You cannot simplify it no further. Okay? So let's look at 9/12. And some of us say, that is simplified, and some of us will say, no, that's not simplified. All right, so a way to figure it out is if I find the factors of 9 and I find all the factors of 12, and if the only factor they have in common is the number 1, then it's already simplified. However, if they have more factors in common, more than just the number 1, then that fraction can still be simplified. So let's do the work and figure it out. So the factors of 9 are 1, 3, and 9. The factors of 12 are 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. Sorry, I forgot the comma. All right, so now I'm looking for common factors. I see they have a 1 in common and a 3 in common. Already, I know that this fraction is not in simplest form because it has the GCF is not 1. The GCF is 3. So this fraction can be simplified further. Okay, so I take 9/12. I divide the numerator and the denominator by the GCF, which is 3, and I get 3/4. So 9/12 is not simplified. However, we can, and we will get 3/4. So you really need to look at a fraction and be able to determine if it's already simplified. So let's recap. If there's a 1 in the numerator, that fraction is already simplified. 1/4, 1/3, 1/6, 1/8, 1/10, 1/12. Those are already simplified. Okay? Next thing, if you find the common factors of the numerator and the denominator, and the only factor that they have in common is the number 1, then you know that it's already simplified and you cannot simplify it any further. Okay? So, if you're not sure, you just follow through and try to simplify it. And if you can simplify it, awesome. If you can't, then that is already a simplified fraction. Okay, so that is it. I'm not asking you today to do any other work because we already did this lesson in class. This is just a video to remind you, okay, of what we learned today, and if you have forgotten any of the steps. Okay, so you are doing your GOMath page, and I think we're only doing even numbers, check pupil path, and we're doing that greatest common factor sheet. Okay, so just so we can practice finding the greatest common factor. Okay, thank you for joining me, and I will see you tomorrow in class.